What is the reason for this visit?
Once in a blue moon, I tell you. Once in a blue moon. The YouTube algorithm will bless me with one of its sacred kidney stones, and boys, let me tell you, I've got a hell of a kidney stone right now. The kidney stone in question is a video ominously titled, Hell is Cold. Now, despite this video being just 5 minutes long, it's rich with symbolism and, well, quite frankly, shit that I could yap about for an unhealthy amount of time. Before getting into this, though, I strongly recommend that you check out their video first. It's going to be linked down below in the description. And also check out the rest of the videos on their channel, too, because they're equally interesting and have a similar sort of vibe to them, if that's your cup of tea. Now, with that out of the way, let's go see if we can pass this kidney stone together. God, that was awful. Seriously, I'm so sorry. Before getting into the meat and potatoes of this video, I really want to focus on the setting, or in other words, the world in which this video takes place. After watching this multiple times, the best way I can describe it is as a nuclear wasteland, and potentially a post-apocalyptic one at that. The sky is completely obscured by this opaque red haze, and the landscape seems to be some sort of Arctic tundra. The term nuclear winter immediately came to mind for me here, which, if you guys don't know, is a period of extreme cold following a nuclear disaster. This is due to, of course, the sun being covered up by a layer of smoke in most cases. The inhabitants of this world seem to be living in various bunkers, with at least 2 of them being presented as these monolithic pyramids on the outside. The living conditions in these bunkers is, how do I put this lightly? You ever seen that show Hoarding, Buried Alive? Like how some of the houses be looking on the inside? Okay, it's like that, but add more mucus, slime, toxic waste, and cigarette smoke, and there you have it. Now, in the opening sequence, we can see a figure wearing a gas mask approaching 2 pyramids in the middle of this Arctic wasteland. His attire here is what really drove home the point to me that this is basically a world after some disaster. The figure in the gas mask approaches the door to one of the pyramids, and a very stereotypical scene of some guy sliding open a peephole commences. The figure inside the pyramid asks why Gas Mask Dude pulled up on their block, and Gas Mask Guy explains that he's just looking for food, he's a little bit hungry. Now this would be all fine and dandy under normal circumstances, except it's not! The figure inside the pyramid asks Gas Mask Guy to stare into a red light. Now, my gut, fight or flight instinct here told me that bro was pointing a gun at him, but I don't think that's the case. This apparently serves as some sort of, I don't know, test, field sobriety test or something, I don't fucking know. And depending on how the Gas Mask Dude reacts to the red light, then he can come inside. Kind of confusing, but that's what I gather here. Staring into the red light causes some sort of flashback, I guess, for Gas Mask Guy. I honestly hesitate to call it a flashback at all, though. If anything, he's basically just transported to the perspective of someone else. In this scene, we are introduced to yet another unnamed character and his wonderful friends. Wherever these individuals may be hiding, I think it's safe to assume that they are also hiding in yet another bunker. Notice how as the camera zooms out, there's a bunch of smoke or steam floating through the air. Immediately after I notice this, the pale figure states, they say that the air outside is not pure enough. Is that true? So if the air inside stank, then the air outside must really stink. All jokes aside though, it took me a while to realize this, but I'm pretty sure that the 3 of these people are just sitting in some sort of sauna, you know, bathhouse, if you will. What a great time to be hitting up the sauna with the homies, am I right? Without receiving an answer to their first question, the pale figure then states, do they have beautiful ladies up outside? Is that true? I mean, you gotta hand it to him. I mean, Bro has his priorities straight. Notice how he slipped in the word up, though, into that sentence, right? This told me that wherever they are, they're probably underground somewhere. One of the figures suddenly interjects and states that it is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31. Are you perhaps religious? You seem like an unsaved soul. Meet us at the sanctuary tonight. I'm sure my ministry will adore your presence. All the while, the figure in the middle remains silent. Now, some of you guys here might be asking yourselves, what the hell is homie waffling on about of it? Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31, never heard of her. What's that? Well, allow me to provide more context. The chapter that this verse is derived from essentially serves as a warning for anyone that insults Jesus Christ or the sacrifice he has made, as doing so would result in severe punishment from the living God or Yahweh or some other word for God. I don't fucking know. To quote directly from Hebrews chapter 10, verse 10. Chapter 10, verse 10. God, sorry, that was a lot. A lot of numbers. A lot of numbers, guys. A lot of numbers, everyone. And by that will, we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. The reason why I wanted to point out that excerpt is that a lot of this chapter is basically trying to stress the importance of Jesus' sacrifice and how it essentially purified the world and gave those who were trying to become holy a chance to do so without having to make physical sacrifices. You will completely see, however, how these motherfuckers completely missed that point at the end of this video. The scene changes to the figure in the middle, now standing in another room. Across from him, a rather ominous flyer from the temple can be seen, and he appears to be hyper-fixated on it. It quite humorously resembles political propaganda with the way it's drawn, but it portrays a picture of Jesus Christ and a call to action that simply reads, "Become a martyr for Jesus Christ." The camera repeatedly switches angles between the figure's eyes and Jesus' eyes, almost implying that there's a deep similarity between the two that is beyond our understanding. The scene changes once more, and we can see that both the pale and the silent figure decided to show up to the church service of this thing that unironically looks like a kidney stone. He opens up his service with a good old-fashioned yapping about how while we tend to focus on how God blesses us every day, what we really should be focusing on is his cruel and unforgiving nature. And he words this like it's a good thing. That's the funny part. He puts special emphasis on how God unleashes his wrath towards those who disobey him, and discusses how in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, the angels decided it would be a good idea to start knocking up all the women on earth. This, if you guys aren't familiar with biblical lore, resulted in the creation of the Nephilim. What is that? It's a angel-human hybrid thing, and they were really huge and really tall, and that's all I know about them. And then this in turn resulted in God being pissed that, well, all the angels were taking away the bitches and that he wasn't having all that, okay? So he sent a great big flood that killed everyone. Thanks for listening to my very thorough and well thought out summary on that part of the Bible. While the pastor is rambling on and on about the sins of man and Noah and how God had to cleanse the earth and all that goodness, there's an interesting scene that appears on the screen here. We can see the outside of the cathedral, and on either side is a soldier wearing a gas mask, and yet another interesting picture follows after it, showing us something that vaguely resembles a series of underground tunnels, or a sewer network, if you will. I just wanted to point this out because I think it really does assist in the world building aspect of this piece. The world is just really gritty and dark, and the world's remaining population allows this darkness to persist through their own desperation and perhaps paranoia. Now, as the pastor recites his own telling of this portion in the Bible, he then goes on to state that perhaps a similar sort of cleansing, similar to the Great Flood, is happening in present time. In his own words, perhaps the reason why the food is rotten, why the world is cold, why the air is tainted, why the bombs dropped, it is because of God removing the unholy and the impure, similar to what he did all those centuries ago. After this, he starts to compare his congregation to the animals on Noah's Ark and himself to Noah, guiding them to purity. Very stereotypical cult leader stuff. He suddenly pauses his sermon to introduce the silent figure in the audience as a new member of the congregation, and that he would like to be spiritually saved. In doing so, he asks that the other members of the church escort him to the baptismal, which prompts everyone to pull out their revolver. The silent figure is brought into a dark room where a flashlight is shown into their face. A voice speaks off camera, and I can see kind of in the darkness what appears to be an old-fashioned scuba diver mask. I don't know why they're wearing that, but okay. And the figure asks the Lord for their forgiveness and blessings to be answered for their subservient child, and do work deeply within their soul to purify and restore them. Come guide their footsteps as we shine the light from your great heart. May you guide them to fulfill the path towards the arms of the Lord. Amen. Notice here that the color of the flashlight actually changes from yellow to a familiar shade of red. More on that later. The view is enveloped by the red light, and we can see a mysterious angelic figure approaching the viewer. I couldn't quite make out what this figure was meant to portray, but I could distinguish what looks to be two fetuses attached to umbilical cords on either side of it. So there's that. We finally return to the perspective of the guy in the gas mask, who walks up to the crucified remains of the silent figure from before. He stoically states, "Poor messenger, so much for purity." Wow, who knew so much information could be jam-packed into a pint-sized little video? What a fun learning experience, am I right? Well, first things first, I want to point out the elephant in the room, which is the continued use of religious themes and symbolism. In the beginning of the video, when the red light is shown into the gas mask guy's face, the same red light is also shown onto the martyr that was eventually crucified. So this tells me that the cult in this video has a much wider reach than it would initially seem. This really gives me the impression of a world gone mad due to a nuclear fallout, and in turn, many of the world's inhabitants have turned to paranoid and cult-like beliefs. Now, what does this red light symbolize? Well, based on the last few minutes of the video, I think I kind of have an idea. When the red light is shown into the martyr's face, an unseen figure can be heard reciting the words, "Come guide their footsteps, and as we shine the light from your great heart, may you guide them to fulfill the path towards the arms of the Lord." Perhaps, according to this cult's beliefs, the red light is a way of purifying non-believers or people from outside the church, which would explain why the figure in the pyramid shined the light in the gas mask guy's face. This is a world filled with paranoid people whose only source of comfort is a scornful God. During the bathhouse scene, we are briefly introduced to a pale figure who seems extremely curious about the outside world, revealing the fact that not only have these people lived in isolation for many years, but some of them were actually born into it and they don't know what the outside world is like at all. In many ways, that would explain why it would be easy for such a person to be indoctrinated into a cult, and of course the cult leader takes advantage of this. After reciting Hebrews chapter 10 verse 31, he invites the pale figure to his church, which then leads to the martyr doing the same. I mentioned earlier that I think the use of a Bible verse from Hebrews chapter 10 is a little bit humorous and kind of odd, because since they would essentially sacrifice a member of their congregation, they completely miss the main point of the chapter. They are so hyperfixated on achieving purity and God's favor that they forget the fact that according to this chapter in the Bible, since Jesus was already sacrificed, then there's no point, there's no reason to be making more sacrifices on his behalf. I mean, that was literally the whole fucking point. Anyways, we move on to the part where the martyr makes the brilliant decision to attend this cult leader's church service. There's an interesting scene where the martyr finds a church flyer on the wall across from him, and he seems to have this intent focus on it, where they lovingly lock eyes for a moment and kind of try to rizz each other up a little bit. Now, to me, this could really mean two things. Either A, this could have been foreshadowing for how this guy would, in a very literal sense, become a martyr of Jesus, or that maybe on some deeper level he felt a connection with the image. He saw a little bit of himself in that motherfucker, for real. As we transition over to the extremely ominous church service, I want to point out the pastor's positioning here for a second. Notice how he seems to be trampling over someone's corpse while nonchalantly holding a cigarette in his right hand. He's just like me, for real. In all seriousness, though, I think this is indicative of the cult leader's true intentions. He quite literally sees himself as being above everyone else in the congregation, and even describes himself as being the next Noah, while everyone else is just the animals on the ark, I suppose. He is very pious and extremely deluded in the way that he views himself, and he couldn't make it more obvious. I mean, just look at that flamboyant ass pose. He's just like me, and yet still the members of the congregation are just kind of like, okay, yeah, this is normal. Yeah, this is good. I like this guy. Moreover, the cult leader goes on to say that perhaps the reason why the food is rotten, perhaps the reason why the world is cold, and why the bombs dropped is because of humanity's sinful nature. Perhaps this is some sort of global cleansing. Well, I think he's right about one thing there. It quite literally is humanity's, if you would even call it humanity at this point, own doing that led to the earth being in this state of disrepair. But his efforts to spin this in some religious way is just his own way, I guess, of coping with a very awful situation. I don't want to say humanity as a whole caused this to happen, because I don't know the full backstory here, as it very well could have been the ones in power that caused this full-blown nuclear fallout. Still, I think this does an excellent job of showing how we might actually react to a similar disaster in our own world. Will we be like gas mask guy and walk around in the snow with our cool little boots? Or will we be a chain-smoking cult leader who probably eats an unhealthy amount of sodium? Comment down below. Anyways, it's time for Martyr Guy to get baptized. Now, I'm going out on a limb here to say this. I'm not too sure, this might come off as controversial, but I don't think he was a willing participant. Why the cult decided it would be a good idea to crucify some random fucking guy? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with them trying to appease whatever crazy-ass version of God that they worship. Again, the cult leader has a very specific fixation on the cleansing of Earth and God's wrathful nature and making God happy, because they're all his favorites. Obviously, he's God's good little boy, #1 in class, get a gold star on his forehead. And lastly, there's the rather cryptic moment where a gas mask guy walks up to dead guy and goes, "Poor messenger, so much for purity." Now, this single phrase completely flipped the storyline on its head for me, and hear me out. The fact that the gas mask guy specifically refers to the martyr by a specific name could really mean a lot of things. Messenger is an interesting label, isn't it? It could be that perhaps this person was actually sent into the compound by the gas mask guy. And if so, for what reason? Was it to deliver some sort of message, as the name messenger implies? Or were they spying? Were they an informant or something? Either that, or this could also be implying that the martyr being left out in the snow was some sort of message to those on the outside. What that message mean? I don't fucking know. Either way, though, the vagueness and open-endedness of this statement really left me craving more, but more I did not get, because that were video end. I'm honestly so sad that more people aren't talking about this creator, because their stuff is just so surreal and fascinating, and their world building abilities are phenomenal as well. Again, if you guys want to go check out their channel, I left a link to the original Hell is Cold video down in the description. Please continue to show love to amazing artists like this, and continue to tolerate my ramblings about them, please. Thanks.